investors. I'm Ghazal Jain, Associate Fund Manager, Alternative Investments, and I welcome you to this webinar. The world of equity investing can be daunting for many of us, and that's why mutual funds are designed to make an equity investor's life simpler. But with the vast number and variety of schemes available in the market these days, choosing a good equity mutual fund scheme itself can be a complex task. Investors struggle to find good, consistent performers. But the good news is that investing in equities doesn't have to be complicated. And Mr. Chirag Mehta, Senior Fund Manager, Alternative Investments, is going to be talking to us today about just that. Do send across your questions for Chirag using the chat option. He will be answering those at the end of his presentation. Without further ado, I request Chirag to take over.
Yeah, thank you, Ghazal, and thank you all investors for joining in. As Ghazal alluded to that, yes, it is kind of made complicated overall, but investing is very, very simple. You just have to follow principles and be disciplined around how you invest. Don't get carried away by the moods of market that you see. It's essential that you be disciplined and stick to your path that you have chosen. So today we'll talk about how do you go about choosing an equity fund? Is it really complex? We will give you our own experience on terms of what we follow in choosing schemes when it comes to the quantum equity fund of funds, and therefore give you that insight that we follow for choosing investments for you. So overall, we run through some slides, and we will be happy to take questions after that. Yeah. So first, let's look at a rationale. I think we all know this, but just to reiterate why you invest in equities per se, right? As we all know, the cost of living usually keeps on inching higher. It's like that auto rickshaw or taxi meter, which keeps inching no matter we like it or not. It will keep inching every day, right? And therefore, the cost of living of a household keeps increasing. So for example, if you were in 1990, the cost of spending for a household of say 4 people would be about 24,000 rupees for a year, right? That's surprising if you look at it and look at it in current context. It's kind of really surprising for many of us. But if you fast forward to today, that same cost of living basket, the same items that go into your cost of household is now about 4,25,000 rupees, 27,000 rupees a year. That has increased by a rate of 10.1% every year. If you see the price of gold for that comparison, it was about 3,400 rupees. It is like 52,000 rupees. So it's increased by about 9.5% every year. So it's kind of matched what your cost of living has. So it's been true to live, right? It's like it's called a store of value, and it has stayed true to it. But really, the important thing to look at is equities. Equities were about 730 Sensex at that in 1990s. Today it is about 38,000. So if you see, that has significantly helped you because it has grown by 14.1% CAGR from 1990 till now, right? So it has really helped you improve your standard of living, help your savings really make real sense because it has increased more than the cost of living, right? So 10.1% versus 4.1%, it has helped you upgrade your standard of living to an extent because there has been excess from equities. So overall, equities is an asset class which has really helped you further your goals. If you were in fixed deposits after taxation, right? You have what 1,064, you are 5,800 now. So it's increased, but just about 6% per year. So if you are in fixed deposits in a big way, you have lost because you have not even equated anywhere closer to the cost of living that has been increasing by 10.1%. So FDs have been a losing proposition for investors. I'm not saying that you need to abandon all your FDs, but you need not go overboard like what usually people have in fixed deposits because the RBI data shows us that most of the people have a lot of money parked in fixed deposits. So that is a losing proposition. Uh, by this count, should you have all your money in equities? No, equities can be really volatile in any given point in time or any particular year like 2008 or 2020. you could be staring at a loss of 30, 40, 50%. So that is a place which will help you further your goals, but at the same time, you need to be cautious that it is a volatile asset class. So, but it really makes the case that you need to be in equities in terms of a significant portion of your assets so that you can improve your standard of living. Uh, Again, why equities? Because say you need a certain sum of money, say for retirement. Like in this example, we have said that if you say you need 2.2 crores for your retirement, and your age today is 35 years, and you have 20 more years to accumulate that retirement corpus, right? So if you are an investor, which is a kind of a conservative types, if you have less equities like 30%, if you have debt which is higher at 60%, and gold is at 10%, you will, with this allocation, you will fall short of your goal or of the targeted amount. You will only end up 1.88 crores versus 2.2 crores in say that you require. But had you had a higher allocation to equities, you would have easily met your goal, right? You would have ended up 2.4 crores versus 2.2 crores that you needed, right? So equities, a higher allocation or sizable allocation, keeping in mind other factors like your risk appetite and those kind of things, if that allows you to take a higher portion into equities, that will help you reach your goal because that has increased faster than the cost of inflation. So so you need to be in equities, right? So overall, equity is an important asset class. You need to have a sizable portion in equities. That's a given. I think most of you all would agree with that. But in equities, how do you go about investing, right? There are 7,800 listed companies, and therefore finding the best companies is a difficult task, right? And people often don't have the time, inclination, expertise to select stocks on their own, and therefore they go to mutual funds, right? Because mutual funds give you the diversification, that professional approach, that cost efficiency, that the tax efficiency, all those things come along with that mutual fund investing, right? Uh, so so usually it's said that if you say are in a profession, it's better that you focus on your profession and you utilize your time, knowledge, and to further that agenda, rather than and leave the stock selection or the investment portion to experts who can do it fairly well. So that's a good argument overall that why people move into mutual funds at the end of the day, right? Similarly, when you go in mutual funds, selecting a scheme which will help you give that return or help you achieve your goals is very, very difficult to find. And what do people generally do is say, look at ratings, look at returns over last 1, 3, 5 years, and say that these funds have done well, and therefore I will be investing in these schemes. Is that a wise approach? That is not a wise approach. Why? Let us look at some data here that will help us why that's not a wise approach, right? Say if you are doing if you're looking at the diversified equity funds overall, all the categories, right? So there are so many schemes, about say 500 schemes all in total in the diversified equity fund universe. Out of that, you need to choose like 5 to 10 funds for your portfolio. So had you been using the approach that which funds have ranked best in last 5 years, I will choose that scheme. So if you had done that 5 years back, what you would find today that only one scheme out of that five schemes is in the top five today, right? Isn't that surprising? So four out of five funds are not in the top five. If you look at different categories like large and mid, only two out of five schemes are repeating again on a 5 year basis. On the large cap schemes, again, only two out of five schemes are repeating. Mid cap, it's only one. Multi cap, it's zero. And small cap, it's two. So the probability of you, and this will not change if had you had the top five or top 10. The probability is gonna be remain is will be the same, right? So the probability of you choosing funds based on 1, 3, 5 year return and say that these funds are good funds and therefore I will invest in these funds, you will be disappointed because most of those schemes won't be in the top category 5 years hence, right? So that's not a wise approach at all because the probability that you have to be disappointed is much larger here. Let's look at dispersions of returns. How returns kind of vary in a particular uh, basis, right? Say if you're looking at just 1 year return and choosing schemes based on that, right? Look at the range in which the funds have got returns overall, right? Based on 1 year, last 1 year returns, the scheme's returns all across mutual funds have been in a range of -20% to +15%, right? So it is a need for you as an investor to ensure that the schemes that you buy or you invest into don't fall into the negative category. At least you need to avoid. So there are so many funds below zero that you need to avoid. It will be at least a total of 80-90 schemes that fall below 0% returns. So you need to avoid those, and you need to be on the right side of the axis, right? You need to be in a positive territory. What mistake that people do usually is whenever they are comparing their funds, their investment returns, they are always looking at the schemes that have given that on the very right side, which is plus 15% return. That's the comparison that people end up doing, and most of the schemes that give that super normal returns in a particular time frame, it's very difficult for those funds to repeat them. So the comparison that you always end up doing is with the best funds at that point in time. And those best funds will not be again repeating the same performance. It's very, very unlikely. It's very, very low probability that those funds will again be at the top. So had you seen that was a 1 year basis, if you see a 3 year basis, the dispersion is still there, but it uh, uh, kind of goes down, right? It kind of, the spread is not so large, because if you see in the extremes, plus or minus, the number of schemes are very, very low, about 5 schemes on each side. So plus 15 has about 2 schemes, 10 to 15 will have about 3 to 4 schemes, minus 15 to minus 10 is about just 1 scheme. So as you increase your time horizon, the dispersion of returns decreases. The range is still very, very similar, minus 15 to plus 15. But if you see the dispersion, most of the funds that you see are between minus 5 to plus 10, right? Again, needless to say, you need to not go and aim for that plus 15 or 10 to 15% kind of funds, but aim at funds which are consistent, which are maybe between plus 0 to plus 10. If you have achieved that, I think you have done a great job. On a 5 year basis now, if you see, the dispersion again decreases significantly. The range is now from minus 5% to plus 15%. The returns from all the schemes that are there in the diversified equity fund category is from minus 5% at to 15% range. So again, here, if you see the dispersion, the range has decreased. Uh, Again, on the plus 15 side, you will have just 2-3 funds there. That's it. And I think it's just because of that category doing well, or that style doing well, you may have such super normal returns. But usually, it will be a good thing if you got funds, say between in the 5 to 10% or 10 to 15% category. If you have got that, then I think that's good investment. Uh, Now, when we all invest, we try to build a portfolio that spreads across market caps, right? Because we don't know which market cap is going to do well going forward. Therefore, we kind of try to build portfolio that has some large cap, some mid cap, some small cap, and therefore have a well diversified across market cap portfolio, right? So in a sort of sense, you kind of trying to build a multi-cap fund of your own. If you're not choosing a multi-cap fund, you're trying to build a multi-cap of your own, right? So within that multi-cap category itself, also the dispersion on a 1 year basis, again, that same wide range, ranging from minus 15% for certain funds to plus 15% for certain funds, right? Again, the negative funds are still again very, very high. If you see, there are 3 tall bars on the negative side, less than zero, and on the right hand side also you have, but on the extreme you have very, very few funds. So again, as an investor, if your expectations is that I need to be better than the average, I need to do funds that are consistent and be happy with a performance which is not the highest, but somewhere in between. That will be that will help you achieve your goals. That will help you to get the best out of your equity investments. Again, on a 3-year basis, if you see the rate dispersion is very, very large, very few funds on the extreme right. Again, here there is a large number of funds between 0 to 5%, some on the 5 to 10%. So if you on a 3-year basis, if you are closer to that somewhere between 0 to 10% mark, again on the towards the 10%, I think that would help you. Let's see on a 5-year basis for multi-cap funds, the range is very, very small. It's 0% to 15%. Very few funds that have got 10 to 15%. And very few, when I say that, it's only one fund that has got that 10 to 15% return. And majority of the funds are between 5 to 10%. So it's very difficult that when you build your portfolio, this could be one of your fund that is in the 10 to 15% range. But when you look at from portfolio perspective, you will generally land up between that 5 to 10% mark on a 5-year basis, right? Uh, if you are an investor which is in that category, in that 5 to 10% on your overall equity portfolio, and you avoided that 0 to 5%, I think that was job well done, right? So if you see, given the dispersion and returns that we have seen, right, and we have seen that the top funds are usually not again repeating the top performance. That consistency of being at the top is not there, right? So therefore, choosing an equity fund is again a task for many of us, right? One thing that investors will benefit by not always comparing their investment portfolio with the top funds at that point in time, because what is top today will not be top tomorrow, right? So you need to keep that into account when you are comparing your portfolio performance today, and see how the entire basket has done and how I have done vis-a-vis that basket, right? So the logic remains the same, right? When you try to invest in an equity fund, it is a complex task. It needs kind of your time. It needs you to have knowledge. It needs you to have expertise, right? When you're choosing equity funds. So when you choose when you adopt an approach to go towards mutual funds because you don't have time, knowledge, or expertise, the same no, same rationale kind of translates when you don't have time, inclination, expertise to select a mutual fund scheme. Then you go through a professional. Either you go to an advisor that helps you find those funds, or you go to a mutual fund which kind of offers you a fund of fund product, and therefore helps you invest your funds into equity funds. Like what is a fund of fund? A fund of fund is a fund which will select equity diversified schemes for you and invest in those schemes on your behalf, right? So they will do all the research, they will do all the monitoring, they will track those funds, and they will take the actions that are required on your behalf, right? So when you're choosing those schemes on your own, right, there are about 550 equity schemes out there, right? And you need to choose a portfolio that is somewhere between 5 and 8 funds. 6 to 8 funds is ideal. When you're doing on your own, what could go wrong? You could choose a wrong fund house. You should choose a wrong fund manager. You could choose a fund manager with a wrong philosophy. When I say wrong philosophy, something that doesn't match with you. You want a fund manager that kind of gives you steady returns over a period of time. But there could be a fund manager who is a growth manager and kind of tends to do well in a bull market. And therefore, you will be disappointed when there is a bear market, right? So that philosophy is also very, very important. That should match with you. And a wrong portfolio. You cannot take more risk, but you are in a fund which is biased towards mid caps or small caps, right? So that could be a wrong portfolio for you. And when you do it on your own, you have hassles of transacting in multiple funds, tracking multiple funds, And when you're doing it on your own, there could be that you're so busy with your profession that you don't have the time to track your investments or track how the funds are doing, and therefore you're not doing justice to your hard-earned money, right? So or whenever you're going through an advisor, you need to be very sure what is the depth and quality of research that goes into it. So overall, you need to be conscious of these factors. When we do it on your behalf, what we are trying to do is, out of those 550 schemes out there, we need to narrow down to a portfolio of 6 to 8 funds that tends to give consistent returns over time. It may not be the top, but we want to give you the consistency so that you don't have to worry about. And what you get is research-based fund selection, consistent performance across market cycles, balance between risk and return. Avoid that portfolio concentration, because many times you see you end up choosing funds which have very similar portfolio, and therefore you are concentrated into same similar type of stocks. So that's not good for your portfolio overall. And for you, there's just one nav to track, no hassles of making multiple investments. So that is the advantage. But more essentially, it is important for you to understand how we select the schemes, right? So that either you can do it on your own, or you can use something from that to when you crafting your portfolio for your own, or you could select to do it directly by investing in just one scheme. There is always a question that people ask us, how many schemes should I own in my portfolio? How many funds are optimal? Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 15? How many funds should I have? So it's always a choice about or striking a balance between concentration and diversification. When you have a concentrated portfolio, it's not good, because you have there is a risk that you are risk of falling significantly is much higher there, right? Because whenever the markets fall, you have a concentrated positions that doesn't help you spread your risk, and therefore it falls more. The diversification is to kind of spread the risk, right? But when you're overtly diversified, when there are too many funds that you include in your portfolio, that doesn't help, because if say some of it does very well, right? If say you have a 20 funds portfolio and say 4 funds do really well out of it, that will not help, because even those 4 funds do well, they are very small portion of your portfolio, and therefore not help you much. So we have done some studies around it, and what we find is above 7 to 8 funds in your portfolio. When you have more than 8 funds in your portfolio, the diversification benefits start decreasing, and beyond 10 funds, it's kind of diminishes significantly. So you should not have more than 10 funds at any point in time. You should have. I'm talking about just the equity funds here. When you're building your equity fund portfolio, so you should not have more than 10 funds. 7 to 8 funds is an ideal scenario that you should have while building your portfolio, because 7, 8 funds are not very concentrated. Plus, it gives you the right diversification. It's the optimal diversification, and beyond this, the diversification benefits kind of uh, keep going down. Uh, so we'll take you through a process on in terms of how we kind of go about selecting funds for the quantum equity fund of fund. You may use this on your own, or if you like this process, you could invest in the quantum equity fund of funds. So it's all up to you, the decision that you can make on your own. But we will take you through the process overall. So we start with all actively managed equity funds. We remove all the sector and index funds out of it. Therefore, we reach a universe which is just a diversified equity funds in total. We look at the fund that has a minimum 3 years track record. Minimum is 3 years, but we prefer funds with a 5 year track record at least. When we look at funds, we look at various things like we look at various types of return measures initially. We see 5 year YOY returns every year. What has been that is a rolling return measure for over last 5 years, not a KGR return. Many people see what is the 5 year CAGR return, right? What is the 3 year CAGR return? What is the 1 year CAGR return? And when you do that, what is common in all three is the last 1 year, right? So if the fund has not done well over last 4 years and just done well in last 1 year, then also it is likely that it will show superior performance in 1, 3, and 5 year. So CAGR, CAGR, compounded annualized growth rate measure, is not a very good measure that you should look at in isolation, right? So then we kind of because we want to compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges, therefore we divide and categorize the funds into two halves. We categorize a fund as a large cap or a non-large cap. Any fund which has more than 60% holding into large caps is, based on our measures, a large cap oriented scheme. I know regulators have a different approach, but this is just for our categorization, our understanding, for our measurements. Like SEBI classifies a large cap fund with minimum 80% into large caps, right? But we want to see a like to like comparison, and therefore we think that above 60% exposure into large caps is kind of a large cap oriented fund, and below that will be a non large cap oriented fund. Post that, we will look at what is the concentration of the portfolio, and what is the churn, how much time the fund manager trades. When fund manager overtly trades and therefore showcase a good performance, we think that is kind of an unbankable performance, because when you're churning too much, today you have earned, tomorrow you may lose, right? Therefore, you need to have portfolio turnover which is at least less than 100%. Lower the better. 30 to 50% is an ideal band, but we will, what is the tolerance? We will not allow a portfolio turnover above 100%. That is what we think is the right measure. So we look at portfolio where top 5 stocks are less than 40%. So it's not very diverse, very concentrated positions. And also top 10 stocks should be less than 60% of the portfolio. So that's our measure of portfolio concentration, and portfolio turnover less than 100%. If these three conditions are met, then the funds are qualified to go further into our evaluation, or if not, then those funds are disqualified. So when we look at when we further evaluate the funds, what things we look at? We look at various performance ratios across time frames. We look at 1 year, we look at 3-year CAGR, we look at 5-year YOY, which is a rolling return. We look at Sharpe ratios, we look at information ratios, and we look at, this is the most important one, we look at performance across market cycles. Where this helps us is we break the entire performance into different phases of the market: the upcycle, down cycle, upcycle, down cycle, and we see in each of the market cycles how the fund has done, right? So the more the fund has seen cycles and the better it has performed in each of the cycle, it will get a very high score. So we want that consistency. We don't want that bull manager or a bear manager. We want a manager that is consistent across market cycles, right? So what we are essentially doing here is trying to judge the consistency. We're not trying to predict the next best fund manager. We want to see which fund manager has that inbuilt consistency in terms of the risk and return performance, right? So we don't just do it for this fund alone. We also see that fund against the indexes. We also look at that fund against the relative performance against the peer funds that they have. So we do an all-encompassing risk and return analysis of that fund. Next comes, which according to us is very important, is the qualitative criteria that we have to assess that fund, right? So when we look at this qualitative criteria, we need to meet the fund manager to understand what the fund manager does. So without meeting the fund manager, we cannot do a further qualitative analysis. So we go and meet the fund manager, and based on our meeting, we'll try to assess that fund. Like, what is the portfolio construction process? What is the stock selection process? What are the risk mitigation strategies? How do they kind of limit their exposure to single stock, to a particular sector? Are they benchmark hugging? I mean, are they very close to the benchmarks If they are, then what is the value add that they are doing? So we need to understand all those things. What is the cash holdings in that the fund manager prefers to run? In we need to try to identify parameters that will help us predict that fund manager's performance, right? So we look at various things, and most importantly, we look at uh, is the fund managed through a process, or is it dependent on the fund manager only? How What is the role of research and other investment people into that fund? Is there a backup to that fund manager? Because many times we have seen that whenever a fund manager leaves, right, there is a significant change in the portfolio. That is what we want to avoid. And therefore, we see that whether there is any other person in that organization that knows as much as the fund manager knows, whose inputs also go in towards managing the fund or not. So that is very, very important. One important thing also that we have is we try to identify what is the capacity of the fund. Many fund managers don't have that answer today, right? We ask them, if the fund were to scale higher than this, what is the maximum AUM standing today you can manage without changing the characteristics of the fund? And most fund managers, believe us, don't have that answer, right? So those are the things that we need to monitor. And within, when we talk to these funds and analyze that, after that, there are certain red flags that emerge, and at all costs we need to avoid funds where there are any red flags, right? So when we analyze the funds, we are trying to evaluate the philosophy, the strategy, the process, the team dependence, the process dependence, how much they're reliant on internal or external research. So those kind of things help us get a better evaluation of the fund that we are trying to invest in. So if I were to break this by doing all this, what we talk about quantitative and qualitative analysis, what I be trying to do is try to ensure that the fund has the right level of balance between concentration and diversification. The fund is a consistent performer that does well over market cycles. In each of the cycle, it may not be the top performer, but that doesn't matter. Whenever they kind of manage the up cycle better, manage the down cycle better, and be a consistent performer, that is what we are looking for, right? We're looking for risk adjusted returns. It could be that the fund manager is taking overtly high risk while managing the fund and showcase a brilliant return, but that could also work against that fund manager sometime, right? So you need to keep that in mind. And whenever we are doing a qualitative analysis, what are we trying to do? We are trying to see whether the fund's portfolio characteristics are consistent or not. What is the fund mandate? Is the fund manager adhering to the fund mandate or not? Right? Is the fund manager walking the talk or not? That is what we try to identify. And we lay a lot of emphasis on investment systems and processes that the fund uses while managing the fund, right? It's not only about the fund manager's conviction overall, but it's about is he sticking to the mandate? Is it a consistent performer, or it is a process oriented or not? So that is how we try to assess the funds that we choose for the equity fund of fund portfolio, right? Also, over and above this analysis that we do, what we try to do is try to reduce the risk that we take, right? So we have a framework. So what's that framework overall? Is not more than two funds of the same fund house. There could be time that many of the funds of the fund house may be doing well, right? So we don't want that risk on a particular fund house. So not more than two fund house of the same from the same fund house. Not only one fund per manager. So if you see, there could be managers who manage multiple schemes, but we won't want to take a very high risk on one particular manager. So so if that fund manager were to leave, there could be two funds of mine that could get impacted, right? So I don't want to do that. So I limit one fund per manager. We also want to reduce our risk by limiting funds in the mid and small cap category. So we only will go up to two funds in the mid and small cap, uh, not more than that. Other than that, most will be in the multi-cap or large cap category or large and mid category. But we want to limit our exposure to about 30-35% to mid and small cap category. And therefore, because over time that has shown that that is the optimal amount of risk that is good from a risk return perspective, right? So we limit our exposure to mid and small cap to just about two funds. We generally equally allocate. We don't want to take a particular style or particular manager risk, and therefore we allocate equally to seven funds that we have in the portfolio, and two funds from the same fund house, because when you see certain funds may perform better and therefore they could increase in size, we need to rebalance them, right? So whenever there is two funds, usually we have 28% allocation to two funds, and if that increases to 45%, then we will trim that. We cannot have more than that. So we have risk mitigation processes around how we have built this framework. Uh, this is very, very important, and that is where investors need some hand holding overall. It's about the portfolio and fund review, right? So what we do when we do it is we run the monthly quantitative performance rankings of all funds. We look at the portfolio characteristics because that is where we usually get the red flag, right? We usually get that question marks that we need to talk to the fund manager and ask him what he's doing, right? Those portfolio characteristics will show you if there is any variation into that fund management style that is different from what we have seen historically, right? And therefore that gives us more need to evaluate further. Then we do a qualitative assessment by meeting fund managers regularly to understand how they are strategizing the fund and how they are navigating the current markets. Uh, we try and create and monitor a pool of investable funds. This is very, very important because if we have to exit out of one of the funds, we need another fund which is ready to shift out of one fund to the other, right? And we do a rebalancing yearly or an opportunistically basis while deploying cash, because we keep getting cash into the fund, and therefore we can utilize that cash instead of trading and moving in and out. To use that cash to rebalance the portfolio. So this is also very important that most people don't do it. You need to rebalance because given that there is lack of consistency overall, you need to rebalance because today's winners may not be tomorrow's winners again, right? And therefore rebalancing the portfolio is important. Uh, One important thing that usually we find it missing when investors manage it on their own is an exit mechanism. Uh, they hold on to their losing proposition for longer than what it requires, right? Uh, because once you have invested and once you're not seeing that performance, there is a need for inquiry, right? And then to take a call whether to stay with that fund or not stay with that fund. So when we kind of monitor the performance of the portfolio, if the fund doesn't rank in the our ranking of top quartile funds over for 6 consecutive months, then we will immediately exit out of that fund, right? And this monthly number is an amalgamation or a combination of various time frames. So it's just not that 6 months that we look at, but we look at various time frames, and then we have designed in such a way that these various different time frames tell us that this fund is losing or is kind of remain gonna be the underperforming fund, and therefore it is essential that we take that action, right? We also take changes where the uh, fund size increases too much for the fund manager to manage for that mandate that he has, right? Like we have taken those decisions in the past where certain mid cap funds had grown to a significantly higher size, and based on the fund manager's own words, it was difficult for them to further manage those funds. And we can see from the liquidity, right? We monitor the liquidity of the funds that we own, and we know by that that certain top positions, if they want to exit that, given the current volumes, it may take them 1.5, 2 years to exit out of those positions. So that's not good. That will land us in trouble, and therefore we need to exit out of those funds, right? Many times we have to exit because if there is a fund manager exit and the new fund manager kind of changes the way he wants to manage that fund, so that's not what we bought into, right? And therefore it calls for exit after careful evaluation. So there are various things that we kind of monitor and take actions when it is required. Some of, say, over last 5 years, what are the changes that we did in the portfolio? In 2016, we did one change. 2017, we did zero changes. 2018, we did three fund changes. 2019, we did one fund, and 2020, this year, we did two fund changes. So it's not that we compulsorily change. If there is any need for us to change those funds, we will not shy. We will kind of go ahead and change those. Like in this year, we exited the Franklin India Prima Fund and went into Invesco India Mid Cap Fund. 2020, this year in April, we exited the Birla Frontline Equity Fund and entered Axis Blue Chip Fund. And last year, when we had one change, we exited again the Franklin India Equity Fund and entered into the Kotak Standard Multi Cap Fund. So these are some changes that we have done over last 2 years, and those are on the top the changes that we have done over last 5 years. So, how has the fund managed? The fund has done relatively underperformed over last shorter time frames, like 1, 3, 5 years, and it's not a very large underperformance. It is an underperformance. We acknowledged it, but I think it is the phase of the market that we are seeing that has led to this underperformance largely, right? But over long time frames, we do have that outperformance that we have, and we constantly monitor the underlying schemes. And if there is any need to take action, we will certainly take those actions. So, what are the portfolio schemes that we have today? It's on the left, the scheme names, and on the right is the performance of those schemes that's there, right? So, for example, every fund may go through some sort of cycle, right? If you see, for example, the Kotak Standard Multi-Cap Fund is minus 2.8% this year, but look at the long-term performance. That's significantly better as compared to other funds or as compared to the benchmark, right? So we do understand those phases of the fund performance, and I think the funds that we have are pretty good funds from a risk adjusted return analysis that we have, and also on the qualitative metrics. So far we have we will stick to these funds in the portfolio. So if you see over long periods of time, we have maintained our outperformance vis-a-vis the BSE Sensex or BSE 200. We have that outperformance which we have maintained over the long run. What is the strategy essentially that we have? This is very important for you to understand and see whether it matches for your allocations or not after looking at the strategy overall. So what do we have is 7 diversified equity funds on an equal weighted basis that we own. We follow this thing that we have 5 large cap funds and 2 non-large cap funds. And how do we define large caps is more than 60% in large cap, and if it is below 60%, it goes into non-large cap funds, and in large cap, it will be large cap, multi-cap, large and mid-cap value categories, those kind of funds. So this is what we have on the current portfolio schemes that we have. It's nearly that 1/7 mark because of the performance or because of rebalancing that we may have done. It's kind of inching around that 14% mark overall. So the Axis Blue Chip Fund, Invesco India Mid Cap Fund, ICICI Blue Chip, Invesco India Growth Opportunities, Kotak Standard Multi Cap, L&T Mid Cap, and Mirae Asset Large Cap funds are the funds that we own. So from the large, most of them are large cap. Only the mid caps are the Invesco India Mid Cap Fund and L&T Mid Cap Fund that we have. So that's the portfolio snapshot that we have of the funds that we own in the quantum equity fund of funds. We also see from an overall portfolio perspective, how does the portfolio look? When you combine the 7 schemes that we own, what is the stock level breakup that we have? So if you see currently, this is the top 10 holdings that we end up having. Uh, Reliance Industries is the top stock at 6%, followed by HDFC, Infosys, ICICI Bank, TCS. So overall, most of the large cap funds, because we have larger allocation to large cap, so you will see among the top 10, it's large cap fund. But eventually, if you are investor in an quantum equity fund of funds, you end up owning about 200 stocks in total. So that is the total number of stocks that we have. We When we look at an analysis, when we combine all the 7 funds, how does it look? Is it a very diversified portfolio? Is it very concentrated portfolio? So we try to balance that as well. And from a sector perspective, you have banks as a large portion, followed by infotech, that is technology. Then we have finance, petroleum, and pharma the next. When we look at the diverse fund management styles, you will end up having mixed styles, mixed biases in terms of market capitalization. So when you look at the large caps, usually they are growth and large cap oriented. When we look at the mid cap portfolio, one we have as growth, mid cap, and one is that we have a blend, which is called as growth at reasonable price, GARP approach. Most of the funds, if you ask me, follow a GARP approach. Very few have that categorization of growth and value, because every fund manager will, at the end of the day, look at valuations in some shape or form, right? When you look at the quantum equity fund of funds, what you have as a guarantee is there is unbiased selection, right? There is no conflict of interest. There are no commissions that we get. There is no a bias in terms of selecting a particular fund for us. What we have to do, what is our fiduciary duty, is to always try to select the best fund for you, right? And we don't invest in any quantum funds, so there is no bias involved, because had we been investing in quantum funds, be it doing good or bad, we will always have that quantum fund. So to avoid that conflict, we don't invest in any quantum fund here in the quantum equity fund of funds. There is a belief or a issue in terms of clarity that people don't have in terms of taxation. Many people tell us that quantum equity fund of funds, being a fund of fund product, is classified as a debt tax product. It's not, doesn't get an advantage of an equity fund taxation. So should I invest in that or not? So that's a myth according to me. When you see that, say if you are invested in 2019 and after say 9 years being into the fund, you were exited and got a value of 3,34,000 rupees, you made a return of 14%, right? And out of that 14%, because it is a after 3 years, it becomes a taxed as 20% with indexation. That indexation benefit plays a very important role here, right? Because of that indexation, you pay tax, you retain about 92% of the returns. How much tax you end up paying indirectly is just about 8%. So what looks like a 20% tax comes down to 8% tax, right? So that headline number is very, very misleading. The actual calculations of returns show that you only pay about 8% tax, not that 20%. So this is very, very important for people to realize that equity fund of fund is not relatively very adverse on taxes. It is pretty okay, and it compares very well as compared to equity funds, right? If you see, equity funds are now taxed at 10%, right? So if you had invested say in a equity fund of funds in 2015-16 and an equity fund in the same year, right? Say both have increased in the same proportion, right? So with a indexation, 20% tax with indexation benefit, you pay a tax because your gains are about 7 rupees, right? uh, because after adjusting for inflation, indexation, your gains kind of minimized from a tax perspective, right? What shows as a 20 rupee gain, because of indexation, it reduces to 7 rupee gain, right? And therefore, tax is just 1.4. You make the same money, but tax you pay is 1.4. Same when it comes to an equity fund, right? In an equity fund, you are making the same gain of 20 rupees, but given that tax is 10%, you pay 2 rupees tax, right? So this is actually turning out to be beneficial for you because of the indexation benefit. So it is not adverse as compared to equity funds. It is at par or even better in some cases when you compare it with equity funds. So please don't misguide yourself saying that it is taxed as a debt fund and therefore it is bad for me. No, it is not. The numbers prove that it is not bad for you. Another important thing about this is people compare cost of investing, and it is very very important for you to compare the cost. What is the time paying for as an expense ratio in that fund, right? If you see if you see direct plan costs are around 1% roughly, right? Uh, the regular plans are around 2%, right? Roughly on an average basis, right? So minimum that you end up paying is about 1%, and maximum you end up paying is about 2%. That 2% comes with an advice, right? Because someone is guiding you and therefore they make you invest in a regular plan to compensate them for commissions, right? So with the equity fund of fund, you would pay 1.2%. Today the expense ratio of the underlying schemes and what we charge you of 0.51% is totaling to 1.2%. So if you are doing on your own, you are paying 1%. If you are doing through some advice, you are paying 2%. And if you are investing in quantum equity fund of funds, which is investing in other funds, so you get expense ratio of other funds around that 0.7% mark plus 0.5% we charge. So you end up paying total of 1.2% all inclusive, right? And therefore, you have to decide whether this 20 basis points or less than 20 basis points that you are paying additionally, is it worth it for the research, for the monetary, for the convenience that you end up getting with the equity fund of fund or not, right? So I think it is worth the additional amount you end up paying, because it kind of very very convenient. You don't have to worry about your investment. There is someone at the helm looking at the funds that you are invested in, takes action at appropriate times. So overall I think it kind of benefits you. And if you look at the breakup of that 1.2%, 70 basis goes towards underlying funds, 33 basis goes towards running cost and legal and statutory expenses. And what the fund house gets as management fees is just 18 basis points today, right? So I think it is a very value oriented proposition for you. The important thing also is that many people, many investors invest through SIPs, right? An SIP could be as low as 500 rupees, 1000 rupees, 5000 rupees. So if you are many funds out there also have a minimum investment of 500 rupees, 1000 rupees, 5000 rupees, right? So with that SIP amount, you may be able to say invest in just one fund. But if you're doing that same SIP in the quantum equity fund of fund portfolio, with the same 500 rupees, you end up getting 7 schemes as your underlying investments. Or if you translate it, it's more than 200 plus stocks. So it kind of, if you were had to do it in the same 7 schemes that the quantum equity fund of fund portfolio holds, you would need a minimum sum of 3,500 to 7,000 rupees, right? And you would not get that exposure otherwise. So here, with a minimum investment, you are diversifying your exposure. So what we bring to the table really is a well-defined review, monitoring, and exit mechanism, which is very, very important. And most of the time, it is missing from how people manage their money on their own. Uh, the money that you invest, it's the job doesn't get over when you make that investment. It needs that monitoring. It needs that continuous look and review, so that you can take the right steps when it is necessary, right? uh, One important advantage that the quantum equity fund of fund brings to your thing to the table is, whenever you as an investor rebalance the scheme, when you change your allocations, right? Whenever you switch from one fund to the other for any reason, you have to pay tax, right? When we as a mutual fund or a equity fund of fund scheme does that change, you don't have to pay any capital gains tax, right? Therefore, because we as mutual funds don't have taxes to pay, right? So that helps you, because that indirectly brings you higher returns, because there is no tax outgo until you redeem, right? So overall, if you see what is the proposition that quantum equity fund of fund brings to the table is research and expertise, diversification benefits, for you only one NAV to track. There is indexation benefits that you get. There is unbiased selection of funds, diversification with limited capital, regular review and monitoring of the funds that you own, lower expense ratio, right? And when you switch schemes, it's a very, very efficient, tax efficient rebalancing between schemes. So I think if you see in overall packaging, it is a very, very good proposition for you, and it simplifies your equity investment needs thoroughly. Uh, and when we say equity investment simplified, we as Quantum bring you a package, right? If you invest in, say, Quantum Long Term Equity Fund, Quantum India ESG Equity Fund, and Quantum Equity Fund of Funds, your equity investment needs are complete. You don't have to go anywhere, because you get a value fund, you get an ESG fund, uh, and you get an equity fund of funds, which is diversifying into other fund houses, right? Choosing the consistent equity funds for you from whatever is available in the entire universe of funds. So if you do that, you will have 9 funds in your portfolio in total, and there with these 3 funds, and your equity investment need is complete. You don't have to go anywhere else when you're looking for your equity investment need. You get that monitoring, you get that review mechanism with you when you are with equity fund of funds. And I think it's your complete equity investing simplified with these 3 funds. So with that, thank you very much. I hope I have added some value at the end of the day, and happy to take any questions that you may have. Over to you, Gasal.
Thank you, Chirag, for taking us through the presentation and for sharing with our investors the thorough research-backed process of the Quantum Equity Fund of Fund and the value it can add to their portfolio. I'm sure it is very assuring for investors to know that the schemes of the fund are subjected to hardcore number crunching and detailed analysis, and they're chosen only after gaining valuable insights from one-on-one interactions with the fund managers themselves, something that retail investors don't have access to. So on that note, let's take some questions that have come in for you.
Oh,
I'll start with the first one. Um, so you mentioned that a very large AUM would impact your decision to include a fund in the portfolio. Why is that? Can you please elaborate on that further?
sure. Whenever you are looking at a particular fund, every mandate that they run has a certain capacity, right? And we have seen, because the fund keeps getting flows, the fund manager finds it's really difficult to stick to that mandate, to run the fund the way it has, because what you are buying into is the historical track record. And when the fund changes the way it invests because of the size that it has grown into, they are not able to get invest in the same way, and therefore the risk return characteristics of that fund will change, right? And believe us that many fund managers, despite that them not liking in terms of the size that they are managing, still have to keep running the fund despite the higher, because the fund house many times don't take those steps which are required to stop the inflows at that particular time. There are fund houses who have done that, but there are fund houses who have not even done that. So we need to be wary whether the fund with that size, with that increase in size, is able to manage the fund in the same way or not. And if we feel that there will be compromise on that front, we need to take steps in terms of exiting out of that fund. Say, we have done that in the past. We had a one mid cap fund in the portfolio, and that had grown significantly in size. And we thought that the way the fund, a fund with widely challenging in terms of managing it in the same manner, or if need be, exit out of the top positions, because we saw that the certain top positions that they held would have taken about 1.5, 2 years even, given the size that they were holding in those stocks, to exit out of them. So I think that is a required action, and if fund manager, if investors are not doing that, then I think that may be a risk that they are taking.
Sure. Chirag, how does the Sharpe ratio help to analyze a fund's performance?
Sure. That's a good question. I see. First, you need to understand that any measure in isolation does not help too much. You need to have a variety of measures that help you get some of the other information on that fund. Like Sharpe ratio helps you understand the risk-adjusted returns that the fund has delivered. So it measures what is the return per unit of risk that the fund manager has taken to get that return. So if you see that the fund manager has taken too overt a risk to get that higher return, then you need to be slightly cautious and see other parameters what they are showing. So basically, Sharpe ratio tells you about the risk adjusted returns of that fund.
Sure, thanks. Um, Chirag, can you please clarify for our investors if the fund invests in direct schemes or regular schemes?
So that's a very good question. We invest only in direct schemes of the fund houses, and therefore our expense ratio of all the seven schemes combined around of the underlying schemes is 0.7%, and we charge about 0.5%. So net to the investor, including underlying schemes, which is all direct plans, and what we charge is about 1.2%.
Uh, Chirag, can you throw some light on the fund's performance with respect to benchmark indices, Nifty and Sensex over the long term? Has
Sure.
the fund generated alpha?
Yes, the fund has generated alpha over long term. Uh, I will just get to that slide here in a moment. So this is, see, the gray line on the chart is Sensex, total return index, and the orange line is the BSE 200 total return index. So the fund, if you see, has generated alpha over both these indices and continues to maintain that alpha. The near-term numbers, if you see 1 year, 3 year, it may show underperformance, marginal underperformance, but over the long term, it has kind of maintained its alpha over these indices.
Thanks. Chirag, what should be the ideal time frame to evaluate a fund performance and why?
Ideal time frame is it will be at least 2 cycles. Will be very essential for us to know how the fund does. One cycle could be even luck that the fund managed to get a better return. but over 2 cycles, I think it is more than luck that the fund has. So minimum I will say is 5 years that is required. And on a higher side, if I have insights into 2 cycles, economic cycles or market cycles that the fund has gone through, it will be an excellent way to kind of look at the performance of the fund.
Sure. Chirag, can you please clarify on the expense ratio of the fund? A lot of investors still think that the higher TER would diminish the attractiveness.
So I don't think it is higher TER. If you see the TER of the fund is 1.2% total. So if you see 0.7% goes towards the underlying funds expense ratio. What QEFOF on its own charges is 0.5%. So total is just 1.2%. Today, if you see many fund houses have, so if you see the average expense ratio of all diversified equity funds is 1.07%, right? 1.707% compares to total both underlying and QEFOF is 1.2%. So it's just total 0.13% higher than the average of diversified equity funds. So I don't think it is anywhere higher. It is marginally higher than the average direct plan expense ratios, and it is much lower than the average of the regular plans, which are above that 2% mark.
Sure. Chirag, isn't 6 months too long a period to exit underperforming schemes?
I think the question would be, is 6 months too short a period, right? So if you see the 6 months that we have is every month when we monitor the performance of those schemes, there are various metrics, long-term performance metrics that goes into measuring the performance or evaluation of that particular scheme, right? And given that each month's performance is a very long-term oriented measure, that 6 months also the measure that we have is 6 months on a consecutive basis, not in the top quartile. So there are few reasons that is either the performance goes below a threshold, which is 6 months. Given that 6 months measures a very long-term performance measure also, but we have designed it in such a way that it kind of hints us that this fund is unlikely to recover. What will happen in the future is no one knows, but we kind of get that trend in terms of how the fund performance is going to shape up in the future. And therefore we have kind of evaluated it various time periods, and 6 months of a longer term measure of each month was an appropriate measure for us to take that decision whether to exit out of that scheme or not. So that is what we do, we stick to that. And that is one way where we kind of exit the schemes. Also we have other things like I said, if the size goes significantly higher, or there are fund manager changes, or if there are red flags, all that combined help us to take that call of exiting the scheme.
All right. Chirag, is there a cap to the number of schemes that can be part of the fund of fund portfolio?
Yeah, so we have, as per mandate, we have 5 to 10 schemes that we will have in the portfolio. Minimum is 5, maximum is 10. Based on our research analysis, what we see that 7 is the optimal number of schemes have in a portfolio, because 7 kind of strikes a balance between concentration and diversification. Beyond 7 schemes, the advantage of having that diversification keeps going down, and beyond that 10th fund, it kind of goes down significantly. That is why we chose to have 7 funds in the portfolio, and we will continue to run that strategy of having 7 schemes in the portfolio. So that is what you should expect as an investor in the scheme, that you will have between 5 and 10 funds. but at most times you will have 7 funds in the portfolio.
Chirag, can you please clarify that after 3 years, will the investor have the option of paying 10% or 20% tax after indexation, whichever is less?
No, that is not how it works. 10%, the tax authorities, the way it is framed is it is 20% with indexation. There is no other way out. It is after 3 years, it is 20% with indexation. And over many time periods that we have seen, that when you calculate the indexation benefit, which is 20% with indexation, it kind of comes down to around 10%. So I think there is no reason to wonder why that will change, or if that will change, it will more or less remain the same way. Because if you see inflation in India is around that 5% mark, it's gonna remain there for a longer time. So indexation is determined basis of inflation, and therefore I think it will stay around that level. So, but you need to be clear that it is 20% with indexation. There is no option of 10% or 20% with indexation. It is 20% with indexation. But when you calculate that for last many years, whenever we have calculated it over a 3-year period, that came down to around 10% after using that indexation benefit.
Chirag, given that investors just have to track one NAV, can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So, say if you were running this equity fund of fund portfolio on your own, right? Then you would have 7 schemes in that, and you will have to monitor those NAVs of 7 schemes. But when you invest in equity fund of fund, you don't have to monitor the NAVs of those 7 schemes. When I say NAV, you need not monitor the performance of those 7 schemes. We are doing it for you on your behalf, right? You have given us a mandate that please monitor the performance of the 7 schemes that you own, right? Therefore, you as an investor will only have to monitor the performance of the quantum equity fund of funds. And if there are any questions, you have all the rights to come to us and ask us for explanations if you find any reason in terms of how the underlying funds are doing. So you need not monitor 7 investments. You only have to monitor 1 investment.
Sure. Thanks, Chirag. Chirag, with 7 schemes in the fund of fund, you end up with approximately 200 stocks in the portfolio. Wouldn't an index fund be better?
The long time periods have shown from a risk return perspective, right, that it has outperformed the indexes. So that kind of gives you many investors are kind of using the outperformance of the index as a measure to say that indexes are better than the active fund management. That may not be true. If you see, there is a stark polarization that we have seen in terms of performance. 3, 4, 5 stocks contributing largely to the index performance, right? Is that going to continue for a long time? I don't think so. That may kind of repeated itself over and over again, right? There is a merit to active fund management. Active fund management will kind of outperform over the long run, and therefore, this strategy of equity fund of funds is better than having an index.
Sure. Uh, Chirag, given that the AUM of the fund currently is at 50 crores approximately, do you think the lower AUM size is a hindrance?
You need you need not look at the AUM of the quantum equity fund of funds. Essentially, what you need to look at is the AUM of the underlying funds that we own, right? From 2 perspectives: whether the underlying funds, because size is no barometer of how the fund is managed. Rather, larger the size, more problematic it gets, because it doesn't allow the fund manager, if it exceeds a threshold, to manage it in the same way the way he did in the past. So so you look at the AUMs of the underlying schemes and look at how good those schemes are, uh, what is the capacity of those schemes, and therefore do they have enough room to take further investments or not. So I don't think like if you choose a index fund, for example, do you see the liquidity and size of the index fund, or you look at the size and liquidity of the underlying index it tracks? You look at the size, underlying size of the index stocks it tracks, right? You don't look at that because the ability of that fund is equivalent to the underlying that it owns, and therefore I don't think that 50 crore is any hindrance in terms of scaling the fund or managing the fund. Even if it grows to say 500 crores, 5,000 crores, 50,000 crores, it will be managed in the same way it is. There will be no change.
All right. Chirag, can you please share the reasons behind the portfolio exits and portfolio additions that 2020?
Sure. So we did two changes in 2020, and both were on account of performance reasons. Uh, like we have an exit mechanism that we have, and based on that exit mechanism, if the fund does not score in the top quartile for 6 consecutive months, and each month measure is a long-term measure, uh, we will take that call. So this is many times lacking in many of the way investors manage their portfolio, and therefore we needed a concrete measure in terms of how we will exit if need there is a need to exit, right? So both the schemes that we exited, like Birla Frontline Equity Fund, we held it for a very long time, but it's practical that you don't get attached to the holdings that you have. You need to take the right decisions at the right time, and that is what we did. So both the funds that we exited were on account of not meeting that 6 month threshold, performance threshold that we have.
Thanks, Chirag. Chirag, why don't you have a basket of only good large cap funds for the quantum equity fund of fund? Because we see 2 out of 7 funds are mid cap funds. Is it safe enough, or does that increase the risk?
Yeah, so what we have done is we have consciously, because you need to have exposure to all market caps. You don't know when, which kind of large cap or mid cap will do better, right? So you need to have some exposure. But at the same time, I acknowledge the point that there is a slightly higher risk when you're into the mid cap category, right? And to purposely reduce that risk or limit that risk, we have restricted our exposure to 2 funds out of the 7 funds. So we have kind of worked through our risk adjusted models and found that it's optimal to have 2 funds out of 7, that is about a third of the exposure into mid caps and rest into large caps. So that is how we have designed the fund as well. And we are taking optimal risk that is required and to be present in that mid cap category as well, to give the fund that investors the exposure across market caps.
Thanks, Chirag. Chirag, why is the quantum long-term equity value fund not a part of the fund of fund portfolio?
Sure, that's a very good question. And as I alluded to before, we don't want any conflict of interest, right? So if you see the 7 schemes that we own, there is no quantum fund in there. So why we have designed it that way, that if we have a quantum fund in there, we may be biased towards it, right? Had it be doing good or bad, we may have some exposure to that scheme, right? And that may call for a conflict of interest. So we wanted to avoid that, and therefore we said we give investors an exposure to all third-party mutual fund schemes and not of quantum schemes, purely to avoid that conflict of interest. So it's nothing that we like or dislike the quantum long-term equity value fund, but since beginning in 2009, we have designed it that way. We will only invest in external fund houses.
Sure, Chirag. So if not the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund, why don't you have other value funds as part of the fund of fund portfolio?
So we have no bias towards any style, right? We will monitor or evaluate all the schemes from all the styles, all the categories, right? Uh, Provided it is diversified equity fund. Uh, but based on our ranking process, none of those schemes have made it to our top rankings so that we go ahead and invest in those schemes. It's not that we don't like. There are many value funds out there uh, who we had exposure in the past, but we don't have it anymore. We have exited out of those schemes, and that tells you that our process also works, right? At some point in time, value was doing well. For last 3 4 years, value is not doing well. So I think the exit that we did out of those value funds was a timely exit, and that gives us confidence that our process also works. Uh, so if value funds kind of gain that traction, show that performance, and will do well, or will likely because our the process that we have also gives us in terms of some insights into how the funds may, because it's a kind of trending methodology that we have. If they will be doing well, it will come up in our performance rankings and it will come into the portfolio. So we don't have any bias. To get the long story short, we don't have any bias towards value funds. If they will perform better, they will come into our allocations.
Thanks, Chirag. Uh, Chirag, how is the Quantum Equity Fund of Fund better than other fund of funds?
Okay, that's a very good question. If you see other fund of funds that are there are usually of the multi-asset kind of funds, uh, pure equity fund of funds. We were until now the only equity fund of fund in the country. There is one recently launched fund, but it doesn't have a longer track record like the Quantum Equity Fund of Fund does. It just has about 6 to 8 months of track record. Uh, so there is no direct comparison between other funds and the Quantum Equity Fund of Funds. And most other funds are there are asset allocation funds or multi-asset kind of fund of funds. Pure equity fund of funds is only this with such kind of long track record. And as I said, there is one that has been launched very recently by one of the other fund houses.
Thanks, Chirag. We're getting a lot of questions from investors on the taxation of the fund.
Sure.
So, can you please revisit that for?
Yeah. So most of the investors have a myth that debt taxation is not good. But if your time horizon is more than 3 years, this is not adverse to equity taxation, right? So if you see, for example, if I have to run you through this slide to give you the exact taxation, if you had invested 100,000 rupees in 2009, in 2018 it became 3,34,000 rupees. So that was a return of 14.01%, right? Uh, when we say 20% to the indexation, what happens is the cost of your purchase, which was 100,000 rupees, gets indexed based on the indexation numbers given by the government. And that usually keeps into account the inflation prevailing in that time period. So if you use that index cost, your cost, which was 100,000 rupees, just for taxation purposes, it becomes 1,89,000 rupees. And therefore, the gain that you had of 2,34,000 rupees reduces to 1,45,000 rupees only for taxation purpose. Your gain actually is 2,34,000 rupees, but for calculation purposes of tax, it becomes 1,45,000 rupees. Therefore, your tax of 20% on that 145,000 rupees is 29,000 rupees, right? So if you see 20 out of the 3,34,000 rupees, your tax is 29,000 rupees. So your total return after tax is 3,05,000 rupees. So if you see as a percentage, which was 14.01% before tax, is 12.89% after tax. So your net tax that you have paid in form of return is 1.12% tax, right? After that 14% return. So what is the returns that you have retained after tax is 92% of the returns. So tax is just 8%. So overall tax that looks like 20% with indexation is only 8% in effect. Therefore, indexation helps you in a very big way. If you had a debt taxation compared to an equity taxation, on the similar gains, your tax with 20% indexation is 1.4 rupees, whereas on 10%, because of the equity taxation is now 10%, it comes down to 2 rupees. So in this case, in this example, it is even lower than your equity taxation. So don't go or don't get bogged down by saying that it is 20% with indexation. No, it is not. When you use that indexation, the tax comes down to less than 10%, right? So it is very much comparable to equity fund taxation, provided your horizon is more than 3 years.
All right, thanks, Chirag. Chirag, for someone who has already invested in four equity schemes, should they consider the Quantum Equity Fund of Fund or the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund?
Yeah, we keep getting this question that I already have some investment in some schemes. Is quantum equity fund of fund a good addition for me or not? So, firstly, it will depend on what kind of schemes you have. Secondly, it will depend on, do you have time and to track those schemes? Are you doing enough justice to that? If not, then I think you should stop investing on your own and move into schemes like quantum equity fund of funds that help you monitor your investments more effectively. So it will boil down to what kind of current exposures you have. But quantum equity fund of fund gives you all the benefit that you need in terms of diversification, research expertise, tracking, monitoring, tax efficiency. So it's a solution for you for your equity investment needs.
Sure. Uh, Chirag, have you considered altering the strategy of the fund and investing in ETFs, as we see active funds are underperforming?
So, as I said before, that active funds underperforming is today's market environment, right? Tomorrow it may change, and tomorrow, and this still there is merit in saying that active funds still can outperform the indices, right? Which I think will happen, given that the stark polarization that we are seeing in markets today, which will change someday going forward. And when that happens, I think active funds will kind of start showcasing the outperformance. So I don't think it is a good strategy in terms of going and loading on ETFs, because indexes are outperforming the active funds today. So I don't think that will be a wise strategy to kind of do that, because as we have seen, even like if you see in the fund performance in March, the fund was doing really well because indexes had fallen significantly and these funds were showing outperformance. But again, that rebound that we have seen, again we have seen that polarization where the certain stocks have run up so much that it has become difficult for the active funds to outperform. So it is kind of a phase of the market. I think it will pass, and therefore it doesn't make sense to go through the ETF route. It still merits having a active fund exposure in your portfolio.
Thanks, Chirag. Chirag, why the differential tax treatment for fund of fund compared to other equity or balanced funds? Has the Mutual Fund Association or the fund houses taken up this issue with the authorities?
Yeah, it is very, very I mean, it's kind of very surprising that if one equity fund is equity taxed, a bunch of equity funds should also be equity taxed, right? It's simple logic. If A is equal to B and B equal to C, then A is equal to C, right? It's so simple. Even I think anyone could figure this out. So we have made representations to the ministry, to SEBI, from ourselves, from AMFI, to change this. But I think still the ministry has not heard our prayers. So overall, we are still waiting for the day when this will also be taxed as equity fund, because it is very simple logic out there, that if a equity fund is equity taxed, a bunch of equity funds should also be equity taxed. So I think that will hopefully change sooner rather than later. We are making our representations. Hopefully that will soon change. But as I've said, don't get bogged down with this 20% headline number. As I have showcased, this 20% indexation eventually boils down to tax of less than 10%. Look at the benefits that it provides in an all-encompassing solution for your equity needs, and ignore that taxation, because beyond that 3-year mark, it doesn't matter you are in an equity fund or a equity fund of funds which is taxed like a debt fund. It eventually is the same as far as the taxation is concerned.
Sure. I think we're done with the fund specific questions. We have a couple of questions on general equity markets. So I'll just ask you some of those. What are your views on international equity funds? Can they really help with superior returns and portfolio diversification?
Yes, it does merit to have some international equity exposure, because it kind of gives you that diversification for sure. Also, the way it helps you is it gives you that dollar exposure. Like if you've seen over years, rupee has depreciated by about 4 or 5% every year, right? On an average. So some years it's very sharp depreciation, some years it's kind of small appreciation or steady state. But over long time periods, on an average basis, rupee has depreciated by about 4 or 5%. So the international exposure gets you that benefit of that rupee depreciation. If you have any goals, or if you have like you want to send your kids abroad for studies, or if you want to have that international international holiday every year, those kind of goals if you have, or if you have any other international expenses, it does make sense to have that international exposure. Essentially, uh, there are two ways to get that. One is to get that through international funds, or a simple way is to get it through gold, right? Gold also gets you that international dollar exposure, because if rupee depreciates, gold price appreciate in Indian markets, right? So uh, so either it does merit to have some international exposure, either through you have it through international funds, or either through gold, but have some allocation to it.
Sure. Chirag, what are your views on ESG funds?
I think ESG funds are not a fad, are not something that will pass with time. I think it will become really big. It will become part of every investment mandate going forward. It is very essential. Not only given that everyone is looking at that, there is a reason why everyone is looking at that, because there are various risks out there. We all know poor governance has a very high risk. We have seen episodes like Satyam, we have seen episodes like INFS, where people had to pay price for poor governance, right? So governance has always been important, but more so now, the environment and social factors are becoming more and more important, and a risk if you ignore them, because there will be environmental regulations that will unfold. There will be social issues that will lead to impact on the companies, and therefore, if you don't include them in your analysis, there will be a problem in terms of how companies may end up faltering because of they are not geared up for those risks. Therefore, you need to ESG funds, I think, will become a very important element of evaluation of by fund managers overall. Uh, Institutional investors like pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, all are moving into ESG in a very big way, given the pledges that they have set. So overall, I think ESG is here to stay. It will kind of become really big going forward. Uh, so if you don't have an exposure, it's time that you start getting that exposure. But it is new. It is evolving. So at this point in time, you can have small exposure, like we have suggested here, a 10% exposure to ESG fund. Uh, and as you gather more evidence that ESG really works, there is enough evidence right now, but you need to see in the practical world how it evolves, how it kind of showcases its performance. And as there is more evidence, you can increase this 10% to a much larger percentage going forward. But you need to have some exposure to ESG funds.
All right. Chirag, moving back to the fund, does the fund have a regular plan, and what is the expense ratio for that?
Yes, the equity fund of fund does have a regular plan. Regular plan is charged about 24 basis points higher than the direct plan. The direct plan is charged at 0.51%, and that is 24 basis points higher, so about 0.75%, if I'm not wrong.
All right. Chirag, given that the fund manager has to invest the money, the inflows that he receives immediately, does that translate into lesser returns because the fund manager might have to invest when the markets are at a high?
So if you're talking about the quantum equity fund of fund here, uh, no, it doesn't matter in terms of the fund performance. We do deploy the funds as we receive into the underlying funds, and we leave it for the underlying fund managers to manage that risk. So if the underlying fund manager has increases the cash, say from 5% to 10%, we don't mind that, right? When we meet them and evaluate that fund, we'll ask for those reasons. What led them to take that call, right? We evaluate that fund manager on the basis of the call that he has taken, but we will leave it to the underlying fund managers to kind of take care of the environment that we are in, and therefore take that call on the cash that the fund ends up having. So the quantum equity fund of funds cash will be very, very low. The underlying funds managers will help us navigate the scenario that we are in.
Wonderful. All right. So with that, we have come to the end of the Q&A and to the end of the webinar as well. I'd like to thank you again, Chirag, for your time and your insights. And I'd also like to thank our investors for taking the time to attend this webinar. We hope it added some value to your investing journey. On that note, we will be closing the session now. Good night.
Thank you all for attending.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.